So, how is everyone? I'm presuming that we're all good, or we're all right, or we're fine. These are the common answers I get whenever I ask this question, but I question these answers to whether they're truth or whether it's a facade that we pull on a day-to-day basis. You see, we're humans, and we possess many talents, but our greatest talent of all is our ability to lie. We lie, and we do it a lot. I've seen Oscar-worthy performances take place, especially when I ask people, how are you? And these lies have greater psychological impacts than you have even begun to realize. I unfortunately realized this a little too late. These white lies have greater impacts that we haven't even begun to acknowledge. They impact our mental health. And we have these things called coping mechanisms. Whether unconscious or conscious, we all have a form of coping. And it's our way of dealing with issues and problems that we face on a day-to-day basis. How we cope can be something from it can be a mental thing, it can be an emotional thing, or it can be a behavioral thing. There are many ways that are different to each other in how we cope. One being creative expression. This one is my personal favorite. Creative expression was the tool I used to build myself up again in a time when I was struggling the most. Creative expression is a communication between how you feel on a paper or on art. It can be expressed in many different ways, whether it's through music, whether it's through writing, as I chose for it to be, or whether it's through drawing, for example. And one of my first encounters with creative expression was through poetry. The poem that I wrote was called Fine, Okay, Tired, Nothing. And I wrote this poem as a way to express all the excuses I used to cover up how I felt. And I'll be reciting this very poem to you. I wrote this poem as a therapeutic release in a time when I was in a very dark place. And it begins as such. How are you? Deep breath. There's several tactics to implement to cover up. I choose my favorite. I'm fine. I'm trying to be, but my crimson eyes still burn with the memory of last night. I flinch as flashbacks return, blinding me inside out, till there's no space for thought to roam as my anguish consumes me from the inside. But I'm fine. Are things okay? Panic seeps in as I realize I've not been hiding despair well enough. I shove all thought down in its cage and with that perfect practice smile say, yeah, don't worry. Oh, that smile can fool anyone. Not even a specialist could identify upon observation that it is indeed crooked, broken, beyond repair. But yeah, don't worry. You all right? Heart skipping fast and mind racing, ready to burst in the unending exhaustion it endures in hiding, escaping, but I can't let it show, so I cram each inch of all the ache into the small spaces left in my heart and head, while I respond an almost truthful response. Just tired. I am tired of hoping for better and observing worse. The dark circles that nest under my eyes are bruises granted by a long enemy, insomnia, who accompanies me at night to remind me that no sleep could save me from the reality that I have to return to when I wake. But I'm just tired. What's wrong? I take a deep breath, rehearse that smile, numb all feeling and thought, and reply, nothing. They accept the facade with smiles and goodbyes, but my teeth remain gritted in that perfect smile, watching their backs turn as a forbidden tear taints my trembling cheek. The pain echoes in my soul, longing desperately for some aid, for some comfort, for something. But I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm just tired. It's nothing. Now, this poem was immensely therapeutic for me in rebuilding myself up in a time when I felt very lost and hopeless. And that's what I urge you all to find, a creative expression that allows you to process those emotions. Because we often hide how we feel, or we often don't have an outlook to really express how we do. So it's so crucial that we find something where we can. And everyone has this notion that you have to be good at something to start at it, that you have to be Picasso to be good at art and to begin that, or you have to be Mozart to begin playing the piano. But you don't. All you have to do is start. Everyone has a beginning, and I urge you to start yours. The next coping mechanism that is immensely useful is reaching out. Now, reaching out is something I struggled with especially. I still remember the day that I unintentionally reached out to the first ever person, and it was on the 12th of December, 2018. I remember it very vividly. I was distancing myself from those I loved. I slept my days off. I ignored how I felt. I didn't consult my emotions at all because I just couldn't. And I bottled up everything I felt into the backside of my head, and I didn't confront any of my emotions. I was too afraid to. Until one day, it was a very overwhelming day. It was a school day, and by the end of third period, I felt the overwhelming emotions start to arise. And I decided, you know what, I'm leaving this place. I can't do school anymore. So I thought, okay, the best way to leave school is to make up an excuse. So I decided I would make up a physical lie saying I felt like I had a stomach ache, so please send me home. I thought it would work, and I rehearsed that line in my head. I was like, how am I gonna play this out? I was ready, and I decided, okay, I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna leave home today. I'm gonna leave school today. I went, I knocked on my IB coordinator's door, Ma'am Bushra. I knocked, and she ushered me in. I walked in, and I was ready to say the lines, but something happened that I've never done before. My voice trembled, and before I could stop it, I was already crying. I was in tears, and I was shaking, and I remember saying to her very vividly, I came here to give you a physical reason to why I don't feel well, but truth is, mentally, I don't feel well. And that day changed me. That day was the first time, even though it was unintentional, I reached out, and she listened, and she supported me, and I thank her for that. And this is why I'm telling you, you don't have to struggle on your own. Reach out. And I know there's many reasons why we hold back from reaching out, whether we're afraid of someone judging us, whether we're afraid of how they'll take it, whether we're afraid that their advice is not going to be the right kind that you need at that moment, or maybe it's something to do with ego. It definitely was for me. I had too much pride to show that I needed someone. I was too independent to admit that I needed dependency. But these reasons of holding back are impacting your mental health more so than you could give it credit for. And that's the thing. When you reach out, there's something that would otherwise not be attained. Perspective. Perspective is only attained when you get the insight of another person. And this perspective will help you come out of that mental fog. Because when you're struggling mentally, you get tunnel vision. You forget how life used to be, and it all just seems bleak and dreary. But with perspective of another person that you care about or a professional, you can come out of that mental fog. And there's always someone. I used to make this excuse all the time. There's no one that would be willing to listen to what I have to say. I am just over-exaggerating this. There's no one I can turn to. But on a long journey that we have, we all need one place or someone to turn to. And there's several ways you can have that. That can be through your loved ones, whether it's a family friend, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, like one in the audience, Jadra, definitely helped me. Whether it's a professional, so this I definitely recommend. Whether getting professional advice is always the best kind. Or even online resources. We're in an era of technology. You guys can literally Google some chat forums, and you'll find online communities such as Ella Friends, which will communicate with you about your mental well-being. There's also blogs, and you can message these people who are documenting their journey with mental health and ask them how they feel about it or what you can do to kind of come out of yours. And there's also well-being chatbots, such as Wobot, which you can consult to when you need to. So now I acknowledge that we all deal with things differently. And I acknowledge that some of us have good ways of dealing with it, and some of us have bad ways of dealing with it. Because in a world where there's good, there is going to be bad coexisting with it. And there are negative coping mechanisms as well. One is overextending yourself, and this is very overlooked. I actually didn't find it. I had to consult my uncle to confirm whether this was an actual negative coping mechanism, and it is. Overextending yourself is when you basically are so invested in the issues and the problems of another that you forget to address your own, that you're so consumed in the problems that other people are facing that you neglect your own well-being. And I did this a lot. I had one friend who had a long history together, and she meant a lot to me. But down the line, she became extremely emotionally exploitive. I let our history blind me from how she was like in present day. And that really hindered my mental health because she would blame me for things of reasons such as wanting to kill herself. She would, even though our issues had no correlation, she would blame me saying I needed to do this for her, I needed to be there for her, I needed to do X, Y, Z, and that would make her happy. And I tried and I gave her everything. I gave and gave and gave, and she took and took and took, and I became exhausted. Until one day I had an epiphany. It wasn't my responsibility to build her up again. It never was. And this leads me to a very powerful quote, and that is, you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. It is not your responsibility to be there for everyone. I thought it was, and I love this sense of altruism that we all have. I think it's important to help people, but you have to acknowledge your limits, your boundaries, where you have to step out of line because your mental health is at stake. You need you, and don't overcompensate by helping others. You have to realize that you are your own priority. Think of mental health like a garden. You have to maintain it. You have to water it. You have to keep on working on improving it. Now imagine your neighbor comes to you and tells you, my garden's a mess. Come over here, fix that. And meanwhile, they're polluting your garden. They're cutting down your trees. They're taking out your flowers. What are you going to do then? You're too busy fixing their garden to realize that they've put yours at stake. And that's what you guys need to take away, that mental health is like a garden. You have to continually work on watering and improving it. It's down to you. It's your responsibility, and no one else is going to do that for you. You can ask for help, of course, but it's your responsibility. And I don't want you guys to take away me thinking that being there for others is a bad thing. Being there for others is so crucial. Being there for others is a great way to communicate in a society that is very silent. But you have to realize that putting yourself first is not selfish. Sometimes, many times, it's necessary. You have to know your limits where you can't step in, and you have to understand your boundaries, that you want them to get better, but sometimes they need professional help that you can't always offer. And that leads me to this one, this mental health coping mechanism, avoiding the issue rather than confronting it. Now we've all done this at one point, and it's called avoidance coping. And it's basically where there's a stressor in your life, but because you're too afraid to deal with it, you kind of put it to the side, the back of your mind, rather than actively trying to deal with it, and rather than actually trying to cope with it. You put it to the side and you avoid the issue altogether. And this is largely because we trivialize issues. Don't do that. Trivializing means you take something serious and you downplay it. You don't treat it with the seriousness it deserves. You look at it like it's not worthy of attention, and you let it foster in the back of your mind because you're not actually confronting it head on. And this is very bad for your mental health in the long run. And that leads me to the point that to really overcome those issues that you're so afraid of you're so afraid of confronting, you need to be honest with yourself. You need to address the issue head on. Ask yourself, how is this making me feel, and how can I overcome that? You have to be honest with how these problems in your life are truly impacting you if you really want to come out of them. And that leads me to that point of being proactive. Being proactive is basically actively trying to deal with the issues head on rather than putting them to the side and hoping that they just disappear, because they don't. And there's two ways and more to do that. The ones I've chose is making an action plan. An action plan basically outlining all the pain and all the stressors of your life, things that are burdening you, things that are hurting you at that moment, and see how can you tackle them one by one. Now, of course, to tackle them, you're going to need to encourage yourself, because it's a scary thing to do. It can be intimidating and daunting to take on your problems head on, but it's crucial if you want to come out of their mental struggle. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a link between all of these coping mechanisms, and that link is very simple. It's honesty. And allow me to elaborate. Creative expression is honesty to yourself. Reaching out is honesty to another person. Telling someone you can't help them the way they want to is being honest to them and you. Confronting your issues head on is being honest about your situation, honest about yourself, and honest to others about how to deal with it. Honesty is powerful, and we need more of that. But how? How can we foster a culture of honesty? How can we bring about truthfulness? And I found myself answering this question with another question, and it's the very question that I started this speech with you today. How are you? How are you is a simple but powerful way of coming out of your mental fog. Listen, all of us have used this question at some point in our conversations, and this is a powerful question because language shapes thoughts, and thoughts shape actions, and actions shape our world. And how are you basically is a way of reflecting how you feel or how others feel. Ask this question to others and yourself. Foster a sense of introspect. Understand how you feel and foster a sense of self-awareness. Be aware about how you feel and be aware about how others might be feeling. Let's destigmatize mental health, one conversation at a time. Mental health, we can all improve our mental health rapidly if we actually take the measures required to eradicating this notion that it's a bad thing to talk about. And asking questions such as, how are you, is a great place to start. Asking questions such as, how are you, will allow you to really get to the root of the problem. And because the thing is, when you foster a sense of truthfulness from both sides, it's really helpful. So the person asking the question, how are you, should be open and willing to know that there will be a different response. That person is not going to always respond with, I'm fine, or I'm okay, and that's all right. And the person responding to the question needs to realize that that you have to be honest from time to time. Now, I'm not saying that if some stranger comes up to you and asks you, how are you, you say, I have clinical depression, fix me. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, be open and truthful about how you feel. And the person asking the question should be ready to have a different and unconventional response. So I'm going to leave you with that question, how are you? And I hope you have the courage to answer that question truthfully. Because in a world where we constantly feel like we need to lie about how we are truly feeling, it's so important